So today's cardinal lesson, we're talking about buying real estate out of your IRA or in your IRA. And um, it sounds great. And my guess is that many of you watching, you've thought about this, or you know somebody that's done this, and it sounds very enticing. I have several $100,000, maybe over $1 million in my IRA. Why couldn't I take 3, 4, 500,000 of it or more and purchase this vacation home, and I can rent it out during the high season. I can use it some. Maybe I can retire there, and I can do all this and own it inside of my IRA. And so I want to bring Tom on, and I want Tom to talk a little bit about client number one here. And it was right after talking with him that Tom said to me, he says, we need to do a video on this.
Yeah. And so we have 3 clients over on the right side of the board that we're going to talk about in due time. But the first one is really the one who prompted why we're doing this video. And he's not the only one that has come in. We've had several come in inquiring about this. But this client is out in California. He already has a lot of rental real estate property, property he's renting out, but it's in non-qualified money he's already paid taxes on. And he was looking at getting another piece of property and wanting to use his IRA because that's where the bulk of his liquid money, the money was in his IRA. He had about $3 million in the IRA, and he wanted to get this house right on the beach out there in California. So he came to us really wanting to do this. And so we listened him out, and we were thinking, we had some questions to ask him to figure out if this was possible or a good idea or not. And, we'll get to it in a second here, but ultimately we advise him not to do it for several reasons. But one of the key issues that you'll run into is you're not able to step foot in that property yourself if it's in an IRA. So I'll let Hans kind of take over and talk a little more about the specifics there, but that is a big stop sign for anyone who wants to purchase real estate in an IRA.
Yeah, well, we hadn't really gotten that out of him of why he wants to buy this house. And we had told him, you're going to have to rent it. It's going to have to show income and all that kind of stuff. But we had really moved toward, this guy has enough resources and is that fired up about working with us that this is just part of his money. So we said, okay, well, if you're going to do this, we'll help you do it. And we're going to take it from the negative side. So we're going to be very scrutinizing and make sure that you follow all the rules, because we don't want to say you can do this legally. And we're going to get down to client number 3, and we're going to talk about that. But we're still advising against it, and you're going to get into the later part of the presentation, and you'll hear why. But for most of you have not done this already. If you've done it already, then you may even get a little defensive about some of my points, because client number 2 over here, he was in the middle of one of these, and we were he was violating so much of this stuff. We were concerned about letting him go as a client, and he ultimately just kind of finished the advice he paid us for. We finished it, and he just kind of went away, and we're kind of glad that he did, because he was doing just about every one of those things he was violating. So I'm going to let Tom go back and tell the story about each one of them. But I want to get back to the points of this whole thing is you can buy residential real estate in an IRA, and you can do it properly, and it can all work just fine. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to say is this is something that's legal. Now, when I was preparing for this show, as I do for all our shows, I was doing a bunch of research to find out and just read some professionals like me giving their perspective on this. And I really couldn't find it very much. I looked hard, and I could find the IRS regulations, but they're not going to give you an opinion to do it or don't do it. They're just going to tell you the rules you have to follow and the penalties if you don't follow them. And then what I did find is a lot of promoters. There's a lot of people, a lot of organizations who are selling something that are convincing you that this is, this is going to be great. You just buy this house, and You do it in there, you get a self-directed custodian, blah, 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 blah. And so I read through a lot of those, and if you're using those as your source of information, you need to get a hold of somebody that is going to give you some fiduciary advice on this. Is what the point I wanted to make. So just getting over to the material, you have to find what is called a self-directed IRA custodian, because I'm telling you, places like TD Ameritrade, Fidelity, Schwab, your local bank, Vanguard, a normal mainstream custodian, they're not going to touch this. I mean, if you just look into all of them and you ask them, say, I want to buy some residential real estate, it's not in their list of things that you can buy and put in your IRA. So you're going to need to find a custodian that handles self-directed IRAs, and they're out there. And then along with being out there, there's a bunch of organizations that aren't really custodians, they're just administrative. They'll tell you how to do all this, but then ultimately they're going to put you to a custodian, okay? And you want to shy away from those people. And but point being, number one is you got issues with who the custodian you're going to use is, and then getting clear on the rules, because they're also not going to tell you, because it's a self-directed IRA custodian, they're not going to tell you what you can buy and what you can't buy and all these rules. They're just going to hold the asset and hold your money that's outside of the asset or your cash. So that's the first problem you got. The second problem is most likely you've got to pay cash, because it's very hard to borrow money from inside an IRA, because your IRA is held at a custodian and it's not you. You can't get a personal mortgage on residential real estate and then do it inside of your IRA. It just doesn't work. I mean, there's some banks that they can put you to that maybe can do this. You might pay a higher interest rate, but you pretty much need to have enough money in the IRA to just pay cash for the real estate. And that was this guy's problem, is that the house he was wanting to buy was $4 to $5 million. It was like 4.6 million. So he was going to need to find some other money. And that presented the first problem right in and of itself, because you can't just throw some of your other money in there to make the whole thing work. The next thing is all maintenance expense has to be paid from the IRA. So if you got rental coming in over time, then you can use that rental income to pay the maintenance expenses. That's fine. But a lot of times when you buy a place and you're going to have down seasons, you got to understand, or you're going to do repairs, expensive repairs, you've got to pay for those maintenance expenses out of cash inside of the IRA. You can't like mortgage the house or just pay them from some other money. Next problem you got is you have to hire the maintenance and the rental. You got to have a rental agent. You can't be the person that's renting out the house. You can't go over and mow the lawn, and you can't go over there and wash the windows or fix the plumbing. None of that stuff. That all has to be contracted with the IRA and with third parties, okay? You or your family can't use it. So that just kicks out the main reason that people are looking at this. Is I have some people, when I'm going through this, they say, well, why didn't you go over that first? That's my whole reason for wanting it, is we want to go down and use this vacation house. That doesn't work, because and it just, when it says you or your family, let me tell you who's included in that. It's the IRA owner, which is you, your spouse, your parents, your grandparents, your children, and your grandchildren cannot use the place. They can't rent the place. They can't use it for whatever rental. They just, if you really get technical, they can't step foot in the place. So that kicks out the reason that a lot of people want to do this thing anyhow. So why don't I just kick it over to Tom, and why don't you talk a little bit about all three clients, but specifically this guy.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think that the last point you just made is the big one, right? I mean, most people, when they come in, the reason they want to do this is they want a second property or second house that they want to use at some level. And as soon as you do that, it could become a disqualified IRA, and we'll get to that in a second. But then it's no longer an IRA; it's all distributed in that year, and you have all sorts of tax consequences. And so, what number two here on the board, this was a couple of years ago, he came to us, wanted us to do a financial plan. We were working through him, and he told us about this house that he had down on the beach here in North Carolina that he was renting out. And like, okay, he said, it's in an IRA, so that raises some red flags for us. And we're just listening, we're taking notes. And we said, okay, so what's the goal of this property? And his goal eventually was to retire and move to this property. We said, okay, let's stop right there. I mean, that's just not going to be, you can't do that. And he argued with us a little bit, like, yes, I can. I mean, his custodian told him he could do this. I mean, that's where you need to be real careful. The people who are marketing these things, they have a real incentive to talk about how great it is. I mean, that's their job, is to sell this, but they might not be informing you of all the rules. And, I think, not all of them are doing it intentionally. They just might not know them. But his goal was to retire. And in the meantime, he had been going down, fixing it up, doing all the work himself, mowing the grass. All of those things are disallowed. And so we brought this to his attention of like, this is, improper. You really need to be careful with this stuff. And so he listened. Whether he changed what he was wanting to do or not, I'm not sure. He's no longer a client. I mean, we did the initial engagement, and that was really as far as it went. But I mean, he was, violating lots of things and was convinced he was right about it all. And then ultimately, if the IRS ever figured this out, it would be a real problem for him there. The third guy on the list here, he's one who's actually doing this properly. And so we were sitting down to prepare for this video, and we wanted to think through. We have lots of examples of people that we advised against it or doing it improperly. And so we wanted to come up with an example that someone who is actually doing it right. Because Hans is right. There is nothing illegal about doing this inherently. It's just you have to follow very specific rules. And so this is a client that we're just working with here recently. He's up in Pennsylvania. He's a lawyer. And so that first off puts him in a category where he's able to read these IRS regulations, able to understand them, knows the things to be mindful of. But he had about 1.6 or so in IRA money. About half of that was already in real estate. So this is something he did before he met us. And then half of it was not in real estate, which was good. And so we were going through, he wasn't looking to purchase any more, and we were just advising on this. But he had these properties. They were truly rental properties. He never intended to use them. He knew he couldn't step foot in them. And so these were off to the side. He was renting out. They were across a couple different states, but he was following all the rules properly. And so we wanted to have an example where someone was doing this right. And so it is out there. You can do it. You just need to tread carefully and avoid all these things that could end up disallowing the IRA.
Well, and his real estate was not something he wants to go spend the weekend.
Right.
They were residences that he's renting, like rental properties, like people that have various houses in a neighborhood that somebody rents on a long-term lease. And he has somebody handling the rental, and those people set up, the yard gets mowed and all that kind of stuff. So he was doing everything right, and he had no desire or no intent to ever go stay there, okay,
Yeah.
or any of his family.
Sure. And then one of the things, and we'll talk about this too, but another issue with holding real estate in an IRA is at 72, the IRS says you have to start taking money out of your IRA. It's the required minimum distribution. It's where you have to start pulling money out. And so one thing that you run into an issue with real estate is if we went to the extreme and someone had all of their IRA money in real estate, how do you take a required, like a portion of that money out of the IRA? I mean, you can't sell a couple shingles off the roof and distribute it out of the IRA as a distribution. I mean, that's not how that works. And so, one of the things that you need to also be mindful of if you're going to do this is you need to have enough other IRA money to pull the distribution out in that year that they start. and then really have a plan moving forward. Because if you could do this for the first several years, it's not a problem. But you start getting into your 80s and 90s, and that percentage is really high, you could run into an issue of having to sell the property or do something with it to be able to satisfy that RMD requirement.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the list of people that can't go in there. Tom just went over the required minimum distributions. That creates a problem. And it is a problem for this guy. He's got 800 grand besides in securities, besides the real estate is about 800 grand. So he's got enough money, he can pull these minimum distributions out of that. But ultimately, it is going to be a problem for him. And he's probably going to start divesting of that real estate. And at some point in the future, he's just going to take profits on it and then distribute it. So in the real two issues that through all of this stuff, when you read in the IRS regulars, is self-dealing. You can't do self-dealing within your IRA. In other words, you can't buy a house from yourself or one of your family members. I mean, self-dealing just means like I'm an investment advisor. And so if I sell myself an IRA, you could make an argument that I'm self-dealing. So it's like I'm dealing with myself. And that's when I make transactions and do things, I have Tom do them. And Tom has me do his, just so we're not self-dealing, and they're done at the custodian. The other thing is custody, which we talked about in the beginning, is that when you step foot in that house or you go spend the week there, you've taken custody of the property in your IRA. And so you got custody issues, you got self-dealing issues, is pretty much all of these things. And so those are what this guy has to spend all his time on this 800 grand, making sure that he does no self-dealing and that he never really has custody of the real estate. The custody is left to the custodian.
One other area I will say that we run into also that's under the same kind of idea of custody and self-dealing is when people hold physical gold or assets or, precious metals, silver, or things like that. We have several clients come in that, I can buy like not a gold ETF or a gold mutual fund or anything like that, but a physical bar of gold, or a lot of them are gold coins or things like that. But I'm going to do it with my IRA, but I'm going to hold it at the safe in my house. Well, all of a sudden now you have taken custody of that gold. Technically, that is, you have distributed it from the IRA. It is no longer in an IRA once you've done that. And so another area, and this video isn't about that, but somewhere else to be cautious of these same type of rules is around holding physical, precious metals, gold, silver, are two common ones that you need to be mindful of these rules as well.
Oh, sure. And a lot of people think it's okay because they've just done it forever. I think that once you get into this self-directed IRA custodian, which if you're holding gold right now in your safe at your house, or silver, or some other precious metal, and it's in your IRA, you've technically violated that, but who's to catch you at doing it? So a lot of people this ends up getting justified just because they've done it forever and nobody's watching. It doesn't make it right. And if they do figure it out, the penalty is the whole IRA gets disqualified. And that means that if you've got, like if this guy violated some of this stuff, got caught at it, and they disqualified this whole 800 grand, his income for 2022 would be 800,000 bigger than it already is. And he would pay a huge amount of tax on that money that just disqualified. It's no longer an IRA, called the whole value of distribution. That's what really happens.
Yeah, and really what would also happen is if this thing that disqualified it happened 5 years ago and they found it, they will go back and disqualify it from 5 years ago. Now you owe penalties for underpayment of taxes in that year. Then you owe all the interest on those penalties over the last 5 years. And so it starts compounding on itself and becomes a real problem again if they find this. And so we're not trying to say try to avoid being caught. I mean, let's just not make the mistake in the first place to even have anything to worry about. And so,
Well, yeah. And so what I'm going to tell you is what this guy might do. We're not done with him yet, but is he's got enough money and he can just make a distribution out of here to come up with $1 million to buy this house. And then he's going to get a mortgage on the rest. So another $3.5–4 million of mortgage. And then he can either rent it like he says he might do, and then it's commercial property, and then the mortgage interest is deductible against the income that he takes in from the rental. Or he can use it for personal reasons. And if that's what he wants to do, we can start pulling out a pretty sizable income for life out of his $3 million IRA to make the mortgage payment. So there's a lot of ways to accomplish the same thing that you're trying to do. Nobody's telling you can't have a beach house. We're just saying, let's try to avoid doing this with your IRA. I mean, that's what our advice, I can tell you what our advice is going to be before you can call us. So, but sometimes hearing what you don't want to hear is good for you. So, that's about all we have to say about this. I'm Hans Scheil.
and I'm Tom Griffith.
We thank you for listening.
Thank you.